What are the most unreliable engines that are guaranteed to fail? That's what we're going to find out. Welcome to Car Help Corner, where we help you, the consumer, master the process of car buying and car ownership. If you want to know what are the most expensive and unreliable vehicles that you should avoid, asking a reputable mechanic is a great place to start. Well, according to mechanics that were surveyed by the nonprofit organization I work with, the Automobile Consumer Coalition, these are the engines made over the last decade that are most likely to fail before 100,000 miles or 160,000 kilometers, potentially costing their owners tens of thousands of dollars. 10 reputable repair shops that were surveyed were asked to share the highest engine failure rates based on their repair order data over the past 2 years. And the results are fascinating, so let's get right into it, starting with the first one on the list, which is Ford with its EcoBoost engines. According to the mechanics surveyed, all of Ford's EcoBoost engines, which are their turbocharged engines that were produced over the past decade, are prone to premature failure to some extent. But some are certainly far worse than others. The worst of these engines is the 3-cylinder turbo, previously a 1-liter engine and now sold as a 1.5-liter engine in the Escape and Bronco Sport. The older 3-cylinder engines had an absolutely horrible design, with a belt that circulates through the engine oil that serves as a ticking time bomb for failure. The 4-cylinder EcoBoost, both the 2-liter and 2.3-liter engines, which are found on several Ford models, have their own repair concerns, including coolant leaks or coolant intrusion, failed head gaskets, cracking manifolds, timing chains, and failing turbos. And the 6-cylinder EcoBoost engines, primarily found on the trucks, are lower risk, especially the 2.7-liter, which seems to be the safest one. The 3.5-liter EcoBoost, however, can experience cam phaser failure, timing chain failure, and turbo problems. There are several recalls of many of these engines related to failure, worth being aware of as well. All of these engines are also quite sensitive to maintenance, and the slightest amount of neglect can significantly increase the chance of a premature engine failure. If you want durability and longevity, well, look elsewhere. And next up on the list of horrible engines, we have General Motors with its 3.6-liter V6, 2.4-liter 4-cylinder, and 1.4-liter turbo 4-cylinder engines. Now, it should be noted that General Motors has been phasing out these engines from its current lineup, and the models which still use them have received updated versions that have largely addressed the problems of the earlier versions. Nevertheless, mechanics surveyed were adamant that these engines should be avoided, prone to timing chain failure, excessive oil consumption, head gasket failure, water pump failure, turbo problems on the 1.4-liter, and several other problems. Again, these engines are very sensitive to maintenance and they are not tolerant of neglect. The older iterations are poorly made engines, and it is not fully clear yet whether the latest GM vehicles will experience the same problems over time. Given that much of GM's lineup has switched over to smaller displacement 3-cylinder and 4-cylinder engines, it is more likely that we will eventually see new problems that replace the old ones. And next up on the list, we have both Audi and Volkswagen with their turbocharged 4-cylinder engines. The mechanics survey claimed that the earlier 2-liter turbo engine used on a variety of Audi and Volkswagen models have a high premature failure rate, usually just after the warranty period. They can fail on the newer models as well, but what's more commonly seen as a problem with newer Volkswagens is the smaller 1.4 and 1.5 turbo engines, which our organization has received many complaints about as well. These engines tend to experience a variety of problems from oil consumption, oil leaks, coolant leaks, bad electronics and ignition systems, failed turbos, timing chain tensioners, leading to complete engine failure, often before the mileage hits 6 figures. Mechanics also warn that these are extremely difficult and expensive engines to work on, so any repair problem with them will not be cheap to fix. The next engine on the list, which mechanics recommend avoiding altogether, is the BMW twin-turbo V8 engine. This engine can be found on the X5, X7, the 7 and 8 series models, and like pretty much every V8 engine BMW has ever made, has been a hugely problematic engine for the brand. They are known for oil consumption, timing chain failure, leaking valve stem seals, fuel system problems, turbo failure, carbon issues, oil leaks, coolant leaks. It really goes on and on. It is also an extremely difficult and expensive engine to work on, and even with frequent 4-figure repairs, never seem to run quite right or be free of problems. Thankfully, the far more common 4 and 6-cylinder engines, especially the current generation inline 6, used by BMW since 2017, seems to be far more reliable and less problematic. But even so, BMWs are always expensive vehicles to own and maintain, so buyer beware. The next engine on the list that should be avoided is BMW's sibling, the Mini Cooper with its turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. The problems are commonly found on older Mini Coopers made before 2015, which are prone to oil consumption, carbon buildup, oil starvation, timing chain problems, turbo failure, water pump failure, and many other problems that could lead to total engine failure. Every mechanic surveyed agreed that older Minis are absolute junk, and premature failure well before 100,000 miles is fairly common. And because they are made by BMW, the repair costs are just as high. Although the newer Mini models made after 2016 seem to be much better, the older ones should be avoided at all costs. The next vehicle on the list is also mini-sized and should absolutely be avoided, and that vehicle is Fiat with its 4-cylinder engine. The most commonly found engine in these vehicles is the 1.4-liter 4-cylinder, which is prone to oil consumption, multi-air unit failure, timing belt failure, blown pistons and piston ring failure, damaged valves, and turbo failure. These vehicles can have numerous other problems, but the engine problems alone are enough to avoid buying these vehicles. Luckily, Fiat is more or less done here in North America, and they now only sell the electric Fiat 500 in very small numbers, so those who are shopping brand new have less to be concerned with. And next up on the list of bad engines, we have JLR, or Jaguar and Land Rover, with their supercharged V6 and V8 engines. I've mentioned these ones many times on this channel. These engines are prone to several issues, including timing chain failure, oil and coolant leaks, gasket failure, oil consumption, supercharger problems, water pump failure, and several other smaller problems with expensive repair costs. Every mechanic surveyed was adamant that these vehicles should be avoided, as they are a never-ending money pit of repairs that never seem to run properly no matter how much money you pour into them. Total engine failure is a very real possibility with any of these vehicles, especially when buying one used with unknown maintenance history. And if that were to happen to you, you are easily looking at spending 5 figures for a new engine. But if we are talking engine failure, no automaker can hold a candle to the next ones on the list, which, you guessed it, are a tie between Hyundai and Kia. This specifically applies to the 4-cylinder engines that were produced between 2011 to 2021, which are the failure-prone ones. Again, I talked about this one many times on the channel. The scale of engine failures with these vehicles is unfathomable, certainly unmatched by any manufacturer in modern history. Hyundai and Kia have recalled several million vehicles with these engines, which are prone to oil consumption, knocking, check engine lights, which is often linked to rod or crank failure, and on the newer engines, piston ring failure. They can often fail well before 100,000 miles or 160,000 kilometers, and no amount of maintenance will prevent a defective engine from failing. The only solution is a brand new engine, which hopefully can be done under warranty, but buying or owning one of these vehicles out of warranty well, you are pretty much asking for a ticking time bomb. So there you have it, the worst, most failure-prone engines in vehicles made over the past decade. Do you have a bad experience with any of these vehicles or an engine failure story that you want to share? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. You can also take a look at my other videos by clicking the links in the corner. You can follow me on Instagram. And if you need any additional car buying advice, recommendations, or help with getting a great deal on your next new car purchase, make sure to visit carhelpcan.com. Thanks so much for watching and see you next time.